Hi, everybody. This is Dr. David P. Perrodin, and welcome to the Week 6 Fireside Chat for Educational Leadership 655, Pupil Services and Nondiscrimination with Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. This week begins Monday, February 24th, and concludes on Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. A recap. Child and human trafficking. Many of you found limited professional development resources in your districts. This might be an area that would be best addressed as a consortium professional development event. Also, expect that your CISA and state organizations dig into this uncomfortable area and bring heightened awareness and heightened professional development opportunities. Speak up, speak out should be emphasized as a way to report suspected trafficking. Ensure that you don't have multiple reporting systems. Think of dialing 911 versus directly calling the fire department and the police or EMS. So if you have this redundancy in reporting systems in your district, understand that can also create confusion. The state has Speak Up, Speak Out, which is exceptional. I will return your graded learning team assignments to each of your team members this week. I see that 2 out of 3 have been submitted already, so thank you very much. It'll be in the feedback files area of the upload tab. EpiPen. So we talk about training, right? And I'll go through your plans for Bruce, but expired EpiPens, they last a year, and instead of just disposing of them afterwards, you can turn them into training tools. For example, you can take an expired EpiPen and stab a grapefruit with it to get the experience of that auto injector and the weight of that EpiPen. So try to make these experiences authentic. Again, insurers, pharmacies, the Lions Club, the JCs, Rotary, other organizations are typically happy to donate an extra EpiPens to be kept in the school. I learned that after an EpiPen is administered, kind of a technique is to take a marker and to write the time on the recipient's arm. So when EMS responds, they know the time from when it was administered to the present time and going into the future, because it does wear off after a certain amount of time. So to document that time and probably put that in your plans. But I'm looking forward to reviewing those. I will have those back to you midweek. Some contemporary developments. There have been many, much more than typical in this class. So I wanted to bring forward Viterbo University is offering a free QPR training. Actually, by the time you've read this, they might have offered it already, but it is QPR. So what is QPR? It is Question-Persuade-Refer. So it is a training which is largely kind of like a suicide awareness, suicide prevention training. Again, QPR. Actually, it's happening on February 25th. 8 to 9 a.m. at NRC 104 as a part of Love Everybody Week. QPR is the gold standard in bystander intervention training for suicide prevention. The training will start promptly at 8. Well, I don't anticipate you're probably going to make it, but my point with this is, what professional development, what are you doing that also includes the community? So right here, Viterbo is reaching out and making this available to the community of La Crosse, which is outstanding. So again, consider when you do professional development in these areas of suicide prevention, of opioid abuse, that you offer some attendance feature for the community in that. I think that's extremely important and often overlooked. The WIAA policy change effective February 19th, 2025. So the WIAA has revised its policy banning transgender students from participating in girls' sports, setting alignment with federal guidance. So understand the local impact. This change is likely to trigger lawsuits involving the WIAA and Board of Educations across the state, regardless of whether the Board of Education upholds or revises their Title IX practices. and policies to align with federal guidance. Expect some very intense Board of Education meetings, and expect some school boards in Wisconsin to change their Title IX positions. So as a Pupil Services Director, again, you need to be informed of what your solid footing is. Some key considerations: the WIAA is not a legal authority. The Board of Education policy changes would be based on federal guidance. So any change is not driven by the WIAA. It's the Board of Education aligning to contemporary federal guidance. Open enrollment will put extreme pressures on Board of Educations to maintain WIAA athletic eligibility. Again, this is where I foresee the majority of school boards in Wisconsin will align with federal guidance in order to keep their athletic teams eligible for WIAA competition. And I'm not an attorney, but I am a policy expert. And I note that procedural policies typically involve public and membership input. For example, the WIAA, in this case, with its membership districts, would have given input and informed this decision. That seems, from my perspective and how I've been informed from others, that was absent in this decision making. This was very fast, and also the immediate implementation mid-season has significant student impacts. Advocacy. Embrace and step into the advocacy role. Just in general, in this position, you must be an advocate. Meet with elected officials. They will meet with you over coffee or over a virtual chat. I have one of those meetings set up with my representative in just a few weeks. Contact organizations that you are a member of, such as ASA and WCAS. Write a letter to the editor or educational journals. Here's something else. Stop blaming Loki. What is Loki? So looking up the Norse god of chaos, right? If the crops were bad one year, you could just blame it's Loki's fault, right? So it is blaming kind of the straw man argument. And don't do that. Plot the course forward. Others will recognize your leadership. As you know, we've just become conditioned to spending too much attention in the rearview mirror and not looking through the windshield. So think about this, okay? These two statements. We've struggled with increased truancy because of the pandemic. Statement number 2. We've struggled with increased truancy since the pandemic. So the first one, because of the pandemic, that's blaming the pandemic. The pandemic's done, right? That was 5 years ago. That's a low key if you're still using these statements. Because of, okay? No, since the pandemic. Since provides a baseline. So you're no longer saying, well, because of this, we are a victim of the set of circumstance, and that's why we can't move forward. You have to identify and say that event has concluded, right? That's your baseline event. You have to move forward from that. It's very specific, because versus since. But if you start using this vernacular, people will pay attention to it, and it will make you a much more noticeable and I think powerful, in an appropriate way, leader. You're leading people forward versus kind of this again, blaming the low-key, L-O-K-I. Week 6 shout-outs. Beth said that in the past 5 to 10 years, I feel like our district has made great strides in teaching English language proficiency. We have multi-language teachers in every building and at the elementary school with 22% multi-language students. The ML teacher often co-teaches alongside the general education teacher. Our ML staff have also expanded our offerings of culturally diverse and appropriate family nights and school events. So thank you, Beth. My response to that, Beth, you highlighted a crucial element of effective multi-language instruction, and that is co-teaching. I commend your district for embracing this model. With undoubtedly, it requires that you also have common planning time that goes with that. So it reminds me of a district I worked with that adopted this co-teaching transformational model. One significant challenge they faced was the school bell schedule. While the existing schedule felt familiar, it quickly became clear that a complete overhaul was necessary to accommodate co-teaching. Change is never easy, but in that district, it was driven by teachers. Groups visited schools with block schedules. They gathered insights. They presented their findings to their colleagues. After weighing their options, a large contingent of teachers and administrators presented a new schedule proposal to the Board of Education, which was ultimately approved and implemented. What stood out most from that process was how quickly staff embraced the new schedule once the decision was made. In fact, it felt like the change couldn't come soon enough. So this is another thing of you have to make a decision. You can only inform yourself for so long or inform other people. And then it comes to a point where you have to make a decision. And once you make a decision, most people will go along with that decision if they had an opportunity or participated in informing that decision and believe it's in the best interest of students. Alexa wrote, teachers and school personnel are trained to recognize bad signs such as sudden behavioral changes, increased secrecy, unexplained gifts, frequent absences, or frequent online interactions with unknown persons. Through training, staff are instructed on mandatory reporting protocols and work with local law enforcement, social services, and child protection agencies. And Alexa is talking about grooming and human trafficking, which typically originates from some kind of online communication. My response to that, Alexa, one aspect of trafficking that stands out to me is how often victims don't realize their own situation. In many documented cases, individuals being groomed or trafficked were unaware of what was happening to them, while those close to them, such as family and friends, noticed behavioral changes and raised concerns with school staff or law enforcement. Another critical issue is the risk of victim blaming. About 7 years ago, a Madison News reporter produced a feature on a college student who had survived trafficking. The intent of that piece was to raise awareness and encourage others in similar situations to come forward. However, within hours, the chat room was flooded with negative comments. So following underneath the article when it was posted online, these negative comments, a lot of victim blaming. TV station pulled the article, and they also posted and said that they were not going to have the victim, be the recipient of additional targeted statements and harassment from the general public. So again, the backlash was so severe that the news outlet ultimately shut down the comments, removed the story, and did not touch that again. Deanne wrote, I can confirm we're talking with students about internet safety and the importance of not friending or socializing online with individuals you do not know. I actually just asked my middle school son what he knew about grooming or human trafficking. These two terms were new for him. I have a sneaking suspicion we're talking about more general internet safety and not going deep enough into the specific risk. Deanne, I thank you for asking your son about these terms to define them and his awareness. And I think that's what we need to do, right? That is qualitative. That is interviewing students versus, right, if you put this out in a survey and he's telling you he's not familiar with the terms and you're asking, students, have you experienced, grooming or trafficking or understand or whatever, they're not going to be familiar with the terminology. This is where you have to ask the students. You have to have those qualitative discussions. Again, thank you, Deanne. Again, if your son had difficulty with grooming and human trafficking, trying to come up with those definitions, that's likely representative of other students in his age group, just not having that knowledge. As you noted, his lack of knowledge in these areas, or perhaps his measured responses to your questions, underscores the need to have very direct, overt conversations about these matters. The depth of predator phishing has increased exponentially with AI. For example, a friend of mine is a white hat hacker, so one of the good guys, and works in very high levels detecting and thwarting cyber-based grooming and trafficking. He shared that groomers are endlessly searching chat rooms such as Discord, and if they receive just a single photo, something as innocent as a photo someone had taken of themselves outside of a concert, the groomer will utilize AI to scan the image. Within seconds, the person's clothing brand appears, the coordinates for the venue, metadata such as the weather, when that image was taken, and that single image of that person can be used to search for matching images both on the traditional internet and on the dark web, which one can access through the Tor browser. So quickly they can access a lot of additional information. One of the nation's leading experts on educating students about internet-based grooming and trafficking is Wisconsin's own Dr. Justin W. Patchen of UW-Eau Claire. I've had the opportunity to watch him present on these topics. He is outstanding. Again, he does present to school districts. I would consider working with your consortium districts or with your CISA to invite him to come in and to present to your students, to your staff. And again, we talked earlier about including the community. In Moodle, school safety is now part of the formal or informal job description of every Pupil Services Director. This is addressed in greater depth in the Educational Leadership 651 Special Education Legal Issues course that I instruct each fall. Some of this content that I'm sharing right now might be redundant, but it is worthy of being repeated. And now you will look at this information through the Director of Pupil Services lens. School safety, crisis preparedness, investigations, K-12 counseling, scope and sequence, all available to you this week. FEMA, School Multi-Hazard Emergency Planning course. You have that. It is due Saturday, March 8th. Assume the lens of the Pupil Services Director as you complete that course. Consider safety training for multi-language students, students with anxiety, 504s, disabilities. Keep that certificate, include it on your resume. And, FEMA courses are free and efficient. Keep that in mind as you seek administrative roles. You can kind of add more skill sets by taking these courses. And I also encourage you to take them, if you're an administrator now, with your other administrators, and then to share that with the board that, hey, we completed this FEMA training on school safety, right? My PBS school safety presentations are available. Matters of mental health and student profiling are centered in those presentations. An example of a 5-year DPI, Pupil Services Nondiscrimination report. Your district completes one on a 5-year schedule. See if you're able to locate it. It should be available from your website. That is actually a condition of the 5-year Pupil Nondiscrimination report, that it is posted on your website. And again, balance quantitative or your numbers with qualitative, which are your interviews. Just like before when Deanne talked about her son, you could include statements and put them and say, when interviewing students at a middle school level, here were some statements that students made, and then here's how we're going to match that, for example, with our professional development for students and staff. The school counseling K-12 scope and sequence document is something that I strongly recommend to all schools. So I provide that this week. I've been talking about it in previous weeks. So here it is. I would add a couple headings now: trafficking, deepfakes, and social media. But really the purpose of that is to identify from kindergarten through 12th grade how you are informing each of these categories. What are you doing to make students aware? Of course, obviously, it's going to be age appropriate and look different. But as you assemble that with your counselors and social workers and principals, right, school psychologists, you'll start to identify, hey, we do a lot at this grade level, and then we don't do much until like 3 grade levels later. And you'll see the holes in that scope and sequence, and you'll be able to address those. And I would suggest then, on a quarterly basis, you bring that document out, you reconvene, and you say, what's changed? What are we doing differently now than we've done in the past? And then also, what is something that we're no longer doing that needs to be removed from this list? So keep it very current. I also would recommend sharing that with your Board of Education. And to me, that was an extremely helpful document. If a board member ever asked me, or superintendent, for example, what do we do at the elementary for bullying and harassment or awareness and mitigation efforts? I can go right to that document and say, here's what we do at second grade. Here's what we do at third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, right? And here's the last time it was updated. Again, that last updated is important. We create a lot of documents and nobody knows where they came from and when they were last updated. So always include on like that scope and sequence document of who the contact person was and the last time it was updated. Pupil Services legal questions and answers. So that's for this week. For our discussion thread, think of frequently asked questions about pupil services, such as custody issues, harassment via social media, etc. This type of presentation is always best to do in the format of providing the questions to the attorney ahead of time and then sticking to that set of questions during the presentation. So again, imagine that your superintendent agrees to pay the attorney to prepare a presentation based upon these 10 questions that you submit. And also then you know ahead of time how the attorney is going to present on those and how that meshes with your district policies and your district practices. An attorney will seldom and shouldn't answer complex questions asked in the moment. So the attorney will typically go in and research those and look at how similar cases, similar situations have been handled, maybe through the circuit courts. So again, you want to know how the attorney's response is. So before the attorney just comes out and presents, sit down and say, okay, let's go through this presentation and make sure that you're aligned to what that is. But that's extremely valuable because these questions come up periodically throughout the school year, but not with enough frequency where you probably have the answer on the tip of your tongue, such as, how do we address this custody issue when it comes to an IEP decision or a 504 plan? The reflective teaching annotation. Litigation is almost impossible to avoid in today's schools. Act in the best interest of the child, document and be aware of Board of Education policy. Most school legal issues are procedural in nature, so it is important to document how you informed your decisions. Again, how you informed your decisions. Review your job description. You might find that you are responsible for an area or areas in which you don't have appropriate training or the necessary resources. When seeking employment as a Pupil Services Director, request that job description. School Affairs extensively discusses the benefits of various school tabletop exercises. As a Pupil Services Director, you'll need to anticipate the needs of students with disabilities, anxiety, English language learners in the event of a power outage, a cyber attack, an evacuation, or an intruder. The syllabus. Weeks 6 and 7 are together in the syllabus. From School of Airs, read Chapter 18, Incident Command Structure, and also Chapter 28, Bollards and Planters. Think about this from the Pupil Services Director's expectation, and also, what your role might be in understanding incident command systems. And look at the accessibility of safety devices. For example, in School of Airs, there's a picture of an elementary school, a picture that I took, where they installed bollards in front of the school, and it was part of a grant. But the deal with these yellow bollards, is just by looking at it, and I would actually physically check these things out, it made it very difficult for students in wheelchairs to easily get in and out of the school via this entrance. And then also in winter, it was hard to remove snow from around those areas. And depending upon how the sun was and casting shadows, things could get pretty slippery. So they remain today. They've faded, they've rusted, they've stained the sidewalk. And the sidewalk, which is 12 feet or more wide in front, plus then another pathway for vehicles and then other areas, right? So, the thought there was no one is going to drive through the front of the school doors with the bollards there, but yet like all the area where kids would be dropped off and lined up, that was completely open. So, some of these things just don't make sense. But again, sometimes you've got to go along to get along. If you don't put these in your grant application, then your grant application is denied. It's pretty crazy, right? But from a Pupil Services Director, wow, that was not a good use of funds. So everybody, thank you for being, again, active posters in this class. And we are kind of rounding the corner here and getting toward where that checkered flag isn't too far down the road. So again, we will have a few more modules, a few more weeks of presenting content, and then you'll get into your research module. And really at this point, once you've completed your learning team project, you'll have your FEMA assignment. And then in a few weeks, I'll make you aware of that opportunity to do your phone call finals. So wow, we have made some tremendous progress in this class. I also want to thank those of you who contacted me during the formative stage of your learning team assignment and asked if I would give feedback. That was an exceptional step for you to do that. So a few of you did have questions on kind of your style and format and just wanting to make sure that it was kind of aligned to what I was thinking, and then also some feedback. That's really a leadership strength, when you do that. So kudos. All right, everybody, take care. Enjoy this warmer weather. I think the deep freeze is over.